Hello, Oggies Worldwide. I'm Dave Kassler, amateur radio call sign KE0OG, and today we're going to take a bit of a detour. I was hoping to provide you with a report on the Bluetooth operation of the D878 UV Plus Anytone radio, but I'm not quite ready to do that. I've put quite a few hours into that, and I want to give it the time to give you a good, thorough report of what has happened and some other things they've done with the radio that have improved it since I last did a video about it. So what we're going to do today has to do with antennas. I have a question here entitled EasyNEC Modeling Request, and this is from Dave, who is Antenna Man, is his email. Now, what he asks is very simple. Just take a dipole, a regular old dipole, okay, hanging up at the half wave, fed in the middle, all right, and add another dipole over here, same dipole. So this size, you've got a half wave dipole and then another half wave dipole over here. It's a full wave for a dipole. And then feed it still over here. So instead of feeding it in the middle with a matching stub, like one of the MFJ antennas, we'll feed it where it was originally. Well, this is easy to model. So we're going to use EasyNEC 6 Plus and take a starting model of a backyard dipole, and then we'll modify it to be the model that we're looking for. And so I'm actually going to walk through, I'm going to record the screen here and walk through what it takes to do this from beginning to end so you can see what it is like to model an antenna. We'll take the basic antenna, a 20-meter dipole, model it, see what it looks like, and then we'll make the extension on it and model it and see what it looks like. But I'm not going to model it in free space because there's no such thing as free space. I'm going to model it over a normal ground, and I'm going to put it up at a half wavelength in the air, and we'll see what happens. So let's turn to the modeling software. What we're looking at right now is a part of the screen on my computer, and we're going to try to run EZNEC from here and try and keep all the windows in this box. By the way, this picture is taken in the Cimarron Mountains, obviously in the fall, not that far from where I live. You go up over Owl Creek Pass and you get to this area here, and it is absolutely a beautiful area any time of the year. So let's go ahead and start EasyNEC, all right? And you get this little thing which is sort of your home screen, and what we're going to do is open a file, and that file is the backyard dipole.ez, all right? Now what that does is it gives us 14 megahertz. This tells you the wavelength at 14 megahertz. Now this is the wavelength in free space, not the wavelength in a wire. A wire, a wavelength is shorter because the velocity factor in wire is about 0.95. We're going to do one source, no transmission lines to mess things up or anything like that. We're going to do it over real ground. The wire loss here, we're going to change to copper, okay, and we're going to define it as 12 gauge copper. Units in feet, we'll start out with a plot type of an elevation plot, and then we can change this, you see, to an azimuth plot, and we'll do that when we get there. Okay, and we're going to take a look at the antenna as it exists now. Okay, what we've got here is a simple dipole, and let's get this up here where we can see it. Okay, we're looking end on at it. It's a dipole, and that circle there is the feed point. Okay, that's the feed point for the dipole. And so we're going to start with this. Let's just analyze this dipole and see what we get. Okay, first of all, let's go into the wires tab. this gives the wires, there's only one wire, end 1 and end 2, and you see that the thing is 33.43 feet long. I think we're going to find that's a bit long. Maybe, we'll see. It's a number 12 wire. There's only 11 segments. Now, I have a paid-up license here, so I'm going to put 101 segments in here rather than the 11. And this we see, here's the end 1 and end 2 with 101 segments. So we go ahead and close that, and we see now 101 segments here. So if we view the antenna again, you see many, many, many more segments in there. They kind of blend together. Now, let's just take a look at the SWR for this thing. We're going to do 14 to 14.35, and we're going to do it in 0.05 megahertz steps. We're going to run it. Now this is a little big for our screen here, so let's make this smaller. Okay, here we are. Let me get this, just get this inside the window. That's pretty big. Okay, what we're seeing is that this wire is actually too short, because we've got our lowest SWR point way up here. We want to lengthen this wire so that we move the SWR down a little bit. You can move that green dot around and see what's going on. Now, note that the input impedance is 88.73 at minus 2568 degrees. So the real part of that is 80 ohms, and the reactive part or imaginary part is 38.45 ohms. Okay, and there's a lot of loss in this thing here. If we were to go up here, note, to a 75 ohm line, we would get a better match. Or you could do some sort of a balun that would make the difference. Well, let's go back to that wire and shorten it a little bit so that we can get down to something that we think is right. Instead of 33.43, let's see, we wanted to lengthen the wire, didn't we? Let's just go to 34 and see what happens here. We're going to hit SWR, do the same calculations, and there. Now that's a nice antenna, okay? It is resonant in the middle of the band, right there. This is 14 to 14.35. It's less than 2 to 1 across the entire band, and if you were to feed it with 75 ohms, then you'd get a better SWR, but then you need some sort of a transformer in there to get it from 50 ohms to 75, but that's not that much of a difference. This is a very nice antenna, okay? Now, if we were to look at the patterns, we could go the far field plot. This is the elevation pattern. This is about the best you're going to get on a dipole. Now, if you raise it higher, you'll move this point down, but then you start getting a little bit of loss. Note that you start getting some bifurcation in the beam. So that's 33 degrees is your launch angle there for max, but note that it is still launching quite a bit. A 3 dB point would be down about here, and you still got some gain over an isotropic. This is nearly 7 dB of gain over an isotropic. Now, you'll recall from the amateur extra videos that the gain of a dipole is 2.15 degrees over, 2.5 decibels over that of an isotropic antenna. That is true only in free space. And like I said, free space doesn't exist. So here with the ground reflections, you're getting some better gain. Let's go in and look at the azimuth plot. We want the plot type. We're going to change that to azimuth, okay? And look at the far field plot. Oh yes, okay, so we're going to put this 0 degrees, we'll go ahead and put this at about, what was it, 30, 33 degrees, something like that. And now we'll look at the far field plot, and we see our far field plot. Okay, the antenna is north-south, like this, okay, and we get most of our energy off the ends of it. Okay, now if you were to lower this dipole, lower to the ground, the elevation would come up on the ends, but it would also fill in a little bit more on the sides. And a real dipole is fairly omnidirectional. But what we have seen with this, we get 6.8 dB gain on this. If we look at the SWR plot again, we can see that the impedance is slightly reactive, which is true of every dipole. There is no such thing as a dipole that has a 1-to-1 SWR unless you do something funny to it to cancel out the reactance. There's going to be some reactance in the thing. Okay, so, and we could easily feed it with 50 ohms, would be under 2-to-1 across the band. Feed it with 75, you could have a small balun, just take care of the difference, and you'd be in good shape. Okay, now, that's that antenna. That's a 20-meter dipole. Now what we're going to do, I want to show one other screen here, and that's sources. Okay, this is where the antenna is actually fed. What is fed is wire number 1. There's only one wire in this antenna after all. One wire, and it's being fed 50% from the end. In other words, if we were to look at view the antenna here, it's being fed in the middle. By the way, that's the current pattern on the antenna. It's being fed in the middle. Now what we're going to do is leave this alone in terms of the feed and extend this out another dipole length. So let's see how we would do that in EasyNEC. Well, first of all, we have to make the wire longer. Okay, X, Y, and Z. This is 0, 0, and then 30 feet in the air. Okay, and then the other end of the wire is at 0, 34, and 30 feet in the air. It's a number 12 wire, 101 segments, and it's not insulated. It's got a dielectric coefficient of 1, which is air. It says show wire insulation, so all right, that's that part over there. We don't have to show that. We could just do that. All right, now this is 34, so we're going to move this length out to 68. All right, 68. Now, we don't want to feed it at the 34 point, 50%, we want this to be at 25% in, okay? Because half of 34 is, let's see, 18. And did I do that right? Probably not. Okay, but now we're changing it. See, there's one wire here at 68 feet long. We want to feed it at 25. So if we look at the antenna, here we are. We are still feeding it at the same place. Here's our wire number 1, okay, and it goes out for an extra half wave. This is actually a full wavelength antenna, but being fed a quarter of the way down. Now you would think that since this is the end of a dipole, it would have very high impedance, which would be a good match for another dipole at the end, very high impedance. Well, let's see if that's really the case, okay? So let's first of all take a look at the SWR. Same, we'll run it, and okay, we're at 75 ohms. We're not too bad here, okay? It's under 3-to-1. It's 71 here. Note that the actual coefficient's 122 ohms. So you could do, let's say, a 3-to-1 balun, which would be 150 ohms. And let's just do that as our alternate right here. We're going to do 150 ohms. You'd have to do that with a 3-to-1 balun, which you'd have to make yourself. You can't find those commercially. But now let's view the SWR, and we're going to recalculate it because I've made a key change. Okay, now with 150 ohms, it's a real nice antenna out there, and it does cover the whole band. All right, so let's just take a look again now that we've calculated that. We see that we've got a full wavelength dipole fed at the 25% point here. Well, now the question might be, is this antenna any good on other bands since it's an off-center fed dipole? I think we're going to find that the answer is not so. Let's take a look at the SWR again. Now we're going to calculate it from 14 to 29 megahertz, and we're going to make these 0.1 here because otherwise it'll take forever to run. So it's running, and you can see the megahertz that it's determining at here, and it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger as we go. Okay, and what we're going to do is see the SWR starting at our fundamental frequency of 14 and going up to double that. Okay, so our lowest SWR is at 14.3 megahertz, SWR 128. Again, note we've got a 150 ohm line feeding it, okay? Now let's look over here. We've got a low SWR at what frequency? 21.5 megahertz. Okay, isn't that interesting? That's 15 meters, okay? And if we, let's see how far we could go down to get to the bottom of, that's 21.2. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to, let's see, lengthen this antenna just slightly. Let's go down to the wires tab, and we're going to make it 69 feet. 69 feet, all right? Now let's do that SWR again. Again, we're feeding it a quarter of the way in, so that ratio stays the same. And we're going to see what this thing comes out as here and see if we pulled that down into the 15 meter band. And this is a very strange antenna, really, when you get down to it. There at 14.1, if we do this 50 ohms, we're way up in the 5-to-1 category here, okay? 2-to-1 here, it's less than 3-to-1. You could feed this on 14 or on 20 meters with a tuner, get it down, or you could come up with some alternative sort of feed and come here. Now over here it's 1.5 at 21.1. Let's see, 21.3, 21.4, 21.5, that's now out of the band. And over here, 20.9, not quite in there. Now this is very interesting. Now note what happens if I go with 50 ohms. No, that next low impedance bump just doesn't do anything for you. Notice that at 21 megahertz, the impedance is 239 ohms. Okay, and over here at 14, it's 116. What would happen if we fed this with twin lead? Twin lead will give you 300 ohms. So let's go back here and change the alternative Z to 300 and see what happens. What this is going to show, we'll look at SWR again. Okay, we're going to run it because we made a major change in the feed line and stuff. So we're going to see what happens here. We might have come up with the world's first dual band antenna for both 20 and 15. That would be fun. Okay, let's go to 300 ohms. Well, we don't get that much of an improvement. here on 20 meters. It's still under 3 to 1. Okay, but look at this right here. That is something. At 21.1 megahertz over here, 21.2, 21.3. That's the entire 15 meter band. Okay, now let's look at something, okay, because this is important. We have not looked at plots. Let's look at this at the design frequency, which is for 14 megahertz. Okay, we've got some gain, 7.2, but look at the weird pattern. It's actually got a null that's broadside to the antenna, another bit of a semi-null that's off the ends of the antenna. Okay, that's an interesting pattern. What is the pattern if we were to change the main frequency here? What is the pattern for 21, let's say 0.2 megahertz? Okay, now let's look at the pattern, the far field plot. Ooh, that's weird. Okay, and it's not symmetric. See how this out here has got more gain than down here. This is about 2.5 dB down. And this is because if we look at the antenna, view the antenna, it is, here we are at 20 meters. We have, in essence, 3 wave, no, these are each a half wave. And there's our feed point right there, okay, and so on. It actually works pretty well. But it does not give us that much. Let's go back to 14.175, which is where we want it, and we'll go ahead and look at the far field plot. Putting that extra length of wire out there gives us 2 very sharp nulls, very sharp nulls. And again, note this is over normal ground. And let's take a look at the elevation pattern on that. So we're going to do plot type, elevation, okay, look at the far field plot, and it looks like a normal dipole with a 33 degree, this is a slice going along the length of the, the antenna down here in the middle. Just for kicks, there is a way to look at a plot type of 3D, three-dimensional. And the problem with 3D is that you've got to sort of visualize this. It's like, see the four thing. This is on 20 meters. Okay, that's sitting level to ground. It's got a really weird pattern. Okay, but now let's go to frequency of 21.2. Okay, and now let's look at that far field plot. That is weirdness. And notice how much energy is going straight up. 15 meters is not a good NBIS band, so that is wasted energy. You've got some really weird lobes in there. Look at that. And they're not symmetric, as you can see. It's hard to visualize this thing because it's, well, it's just weird, that's all. It's just weird. Okay, let's go back to azimuth. No, let's go to elevation on this thing. Where's my plot type? Okay, elevation. And do the far field plot. And what we're finding here, this is what happens when you put an antenna higher than a half a wavelength. In fact, it's at a wavelength and a, well, it's not 2 wavelengths. But it's up there. It's higher than it should be for 15 meters. And so you get the beginnings of this second lobe here. And so you've got a lot of energy going straight up in the air. If you were to lower it to ground, closer to a half wavelength for 15 meters, or 15 meters. Let's see, the wavelength is 46, so 23. Let's go down here and do a 23 feet up. 23. And this end at 23. Okay, now let's go back and do that elevation plot again. And you lose the lump in the middle, and you get really only 5 dB again, because let's take a look at the 3D plot on this. This is fun. We're a little lower to the ground. Look at the far field plot. And so you've got energy going off in weird directions. And it is not symmetric. Not symmetric. Because we're not feeding it symmetric. This is a problem with off-center fed dipoles. You get non-symmetric patterns. Well, that was interesting, wasn't it? Didn't quite come out the way that maybe intuitively we thought it might. We did get a weird antenna pattern on the thing. It is possible to match. It can be done, but you're going to need a balun or some other thing like that to make it work. And there's a pretty big reactive part of the impedance in there. Thanks for watching to Ask Dave. Remember all of these websites that can help you support Ask Dave. And until we next meet, 73.